ordinary human dating. It's enjoyable and it serves an important purpose. But when a human dates an artificial mate, there is no purpose, only enjoyment. And that leads to tragedy.
Welcome, everybody, to the PsychTech podcast. I am one of your hosts, Kelly Dunlap, and I am joined by
Josué Cardona.
And today's episode is Don't Date Robots, for obvious reasons. I mean, anybody familiar with that Futurama short knows exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, and once again, Futurama proving what will undoubtedly be, the most accurate portrayal of the year 3000.
Oh, yeah. So, yes, today's topic is in honor of St. Valentine's Day, and so we thought we would talk about love and robots.
Obviously.
And
yeah.
Robot love.
Yeah. Love with robots, maybe?
Love with robots. Love of robots. Robots loving robots.
People loving robots?
And robots loving people.
Let's get into this. All right.
Dun, dun, dun. So I guess the first thing that I wanted to kind of dive into is, before we can even touch the robots, I think we need to understand, what is love?
That's good. I was going to ask you.
You should ask me.
Okay. So what is love?
Baby, don't hurt me no more.
That's your answer?
That's the Night at the Roxbury. That's how you answer that question. So anyway.
Just want to make sure you were on the record for that.
Yeah, no, on the record. Night at the Roxbury. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. So love, I think when most people think about love, they think about like super cute heart shapes and pink and flowers and romance, or maybe at the other end, just kind of getting it on and some Marvin Gaye and, moving their groove thing and things like that. And I always find it interesting that we ascribe love to the heart, but as with all things in human beings, it's actually our brains. And I'm gonna guess Hallmark decided that a cute little heart shape looks better on a card than like a cabbage-sized squishy gray matter lumpy thing, because that's what the brain is. And what's really interesting is we all think about love as just being this thing that just happens, and there's love at first sight, and there's all these stories about love and all these myths about love. But when you break it down, love, like pretty much everything else, is a chemical reaction in our brain. And that to me makes it all the more exciting, although other people may find it depressing.
So the best explanation I ever got regarding what love is, second best to yours, and then at the Roxbury, was to look at it as the question kind of came up as like, when you love somebody, what is that? You kind of play with that idea of that connection and that thing that's happening to two people. But the truth is, when you say you love somebody, right? It's like you just said, it's stuff going on in the brain. And the way we feel that is we are feeling it. So in a very sad way, there doesn't necessarily have to be anything coming from that other person or thing or robot, right? It's a personal feeling. When you love somebody, it's something that you are feeling, and it's kind of independent of that other thing or person. And when I kind of figured that out, it kind of put a lot of stuff into perspective, because I think we do have that idea of, the romance and this connection that's just so esoteric, and you can't describe it and you can't see it, but it's something between two people. And that's not necessarily the case. And I think that's going to be really important in today's conversation.
PsychTech podcast.
Yes.
Putting the downer in Valentine's Day.
Hopefully for years to come.
Exactly. So kind of the first step of understanding love is what a lot of people think of is lust. So that idea of love at first sight, of, man, I really want to hit that. And that is driven pretty much entirely by estrogen and testosterone in both genders. So both women have both testosterone and estrogen, and men have both testosterone and estrogen. And when you see somebody like, man, I need to get with that, then that is the hormones going absolutely crazy. And the point is to spur reproduction, is basically what lust is. Its evolutionary purpose is reproduction.
Making babies.
Yeah, getting it on. But shortly after that, if it's more than like a one night stand or a fling, then you move into the second stage of love, which is attraction. So this is when you start to like think about that person and want to spend hours with that person. You stay up all night talking and sharing thoughts and feelings and ideas. And what's happening chemically is all your pleasure centers are lighting up. So not just the, hey, let's get it on and make babies, evolutionary pressure center, but the serotonin and the dopamine and the adrenaline actually are all different neurochemicals that are going wild in your brain, hitting all your pleasure centers and actually lighting up the same centers that are lit up in people with OCD. So that idea that you just can't get the thing out of your mind and you're thinking about this one thing all the time, that's actually very kind of OCD-ish. And that's your brain going, hey, I really like this thing. I want more of it because it makes me feel really, really good. So that's the attraction stage. And then the third stage is the attachment stage. And there's some difference on when this actually happens. Some people talk about the 7-year itch, when the hot, passionate stuff kind of maybe dies away and is replaced more by like the ordinary everyday stuff. Although I think a lot of research says that the attraction stage takes about 2 to 3 years. So take that as you will. But what I think the attachment stage is what we think about. Well, I think about when I think about love, is it's more of the, again, attachment, just being with that person, and it doesn't have to, just because you look at them, you still love them, but they might not get your pulse going like they used to. Your husband starts wearing his tube socks and his holy underwear, and you start schlepping around in, baggy whatevers, and maybe you don't shower every day anymore. But you still want to be around each other, and you can't imagine, your life without that other person. And neurochemically what's going on is you're releasing a lot of oxytocin and vasopressin. And these are drugs, whereas the previous ones were all about like excitement and getting stuff going and rewarding the pleasure centers. These particular drugs are more about making connections, like bonding. Oxytocin is often referred to as the cuddle drug, because when you hold somebody or are held, after, I think it's about 20 or 30 seconds, oxytocin starts to be released. When mothers nurse, oxytocin is released to help create a bond between mother and child. When you're in the attachment stage and you have sex, oxytocin and vasopressin are released as well. So it's all about creating that bonding. And so whereas lust is more of the evolutionary, hey, let's make babies, the attachment stage is more about, hey, let's raise those wonderful, loving children together.
You got on me last week for saying intrinsic and extrinsic, that those were too long, that I need to use shorter words. Used a lot of big words.
I'm sorry, there's no shortcut for oxytocin. And if I do call it oxy, people are probably thinking the OxyClean guy. Yeah. And yeah. But basically, the neurochemicals in your brain, they do stuff. And based on where you are in that particular stage of your relationship, you have different chemicals doing different things. And that is what love is. Although I still maintain that love is when my husband brings me a brownie without me having to ask him to bring me a brownie. That's like the manifestation of love.
Walk us through it. So what's happening in your brain when he brings you a brownie?
Well, probably my hunger centers are lighting up, going, man, I really want a brownie. And my pleasure centers are lighting up because they're like, hey, we really want this brownie. Let's get some brownie. And then my motivational centers are going, no, but I don't want to get up. It's so far to the kitchen. And then I look up, and there is my husband, and he has a second brownie. And then my anticipatory system lights up and goes, oh my goodness, he might be bringing me a brownie. And then my, I always get them confused. Your parasympathetic and your sympathetic. I think it's parasympathetic is the one that's rest and digest. So it gets like your body going, ready to eat food. So I start salivating, kind of like Pavlov's dogs. And then he gives me the brownie and our eyes meet. And there's this moment of connection and the oxytocin flows. And then I eat the brownie and the dopamine flows. And there's just all sorts of good, wonderful feelings.
I just want to add that at my house, it's cannolis that do the trick. Yep.
Everybody's a little bit different. And so, yeah, I guess just kind of the basic understanding of what love is, because if you have the idea that the love is this thing that humans do because our hearts are throbbing and stuff, it's going to be really hard to translate that to, say, a robot. But if you think about love as being a chemical reaction, almost a electronic reaction, considering all the chemicals and all the electricity in our brains, it's a lot easier to map that onto a robot.
So I think we've done a really good job in explaining that it's all happening in your head, in your body, in different places, and it's happening to you. So I think the first question I want to discuss then is, can people love a robot? Can you get that same type of thing toward something that isn't a person?
I think you can maybe get to like the attraction, like the lust and attraction stage, because they can make some pretty sexy robots. But as far as like the attachment stage of having like this meaningful reciprocal thing, I think that's a little bit more difficult. And it's really a shame you're not further in Black Mirror, because that's a perfect question for like the second season. But that's all I'm going to say.
Hey, no Black Mirror talk until...
I know. I'm censoring.
Okay.
It's spoiler free. But yeah, I think you can be... I mean, because you can be... Well, we know that people can be attracted to anything. That is why paraphilias exist. Paraphilias is the broad term for loving of things. Odd loving of things.
So I'm sure there's tons of people listening and saying, hey, but I love X thing, right? Kind of like having a problem. What if a robot brought you a brownie, you know, in that scenario?
I would love that robot.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, I mean, it just represents, or at least it makes me think, okay, so if all those things are happening, right? If we're going through these stages, but do they mean the same thing to everyone? Is everybody being activated, or are all those neurochemicals being activated for the same reasons in everybody? So could it be that one thing that really makes me love someone or feel that could happen something else, right? Just like it could happen with someone else.
I feel like the internal chemistry is probably the same, but what elicits that chemical reaction is probably different for everybody. So, for example, if my husband brought me a brownie and it had nuts in it, I would probably throw it back in his face and I would react with disgust, because you don't ruin chocolate by putting nuts in it. Alternatively, I've worked in clinics where I worked with one particular individual who was sexually aroused by neoprene, the stuff that wetsuits are made out of.
Mm-hmm.
And like he genuinely really, really loved neoprene because of the way it made him feel. I don't know if he had that kind of oxytocin type of attachment to it, as that he wanted to like grow old with it, but it definitely aroused him in a way that he really liked. So I think you can love anything.
Yeah, and that's kind of the problem with relationships, right? There are reasons why A loves B, and there may be completely different reasons why B loves A, or at least why they think that they love this person. I think love is just that word that we use to describe really intense positive feelings. Although some people probably use it to describe very negative feelings.
Like I love my husband. I love brownies. I love warm sunny days. Well, no, I don't like the beach at all. But, you know, I love a lot of things, but I love them in all different ways. So, I mean, I both love my husband and a brownie, but I love them in very different ways.
Yeah.
But we're using one word to kind of like encompass, like you said, a really intense positive feeling.
Yeah. And we assume why the person is feeling that they're feeling. And that is where a lot of problems in relationships come up. And not just romantic relationships, just in general.
Yeah. I mean, even just like fraternal or siblings, parent-child. I mean, there's tons of different kinds of love. And I think one of my favorite examples, it's from the very much psych side of PsychTech. There was a project in the 60s called ELIZA. So in the 60s, when they were like just getting into like the programming of computers and starting to wonder, you know, computers think, can they simulate human beings? A little bit after the Turing test, ELIZA was created by, I believe, a professor at MIT who wanted to know, hey, could a computer replicate a therapist? And what he did is he programmed this particular programming language called ELIZA, and it took a very Rogerian approach to therapy. So, for example, for those who might not know Rogers, he was a very reflective kind of individual. So in his therapy, as someone who says, hey, I'm feeling really depressed, his answer would probably be, oh, I'm sorry you're feeling depressed, or I hear that you're feeling depressed. And pretty much just kind of reflected everything that was said to him, reflected it back onto the person in a very non-directive kind of way, so that the person kind of went on their own journey and not where he wanted them to go. So they programmed this computer called ELIZA to basically do that. So people would type in, I'm feeling sad, or I'm lonely, or I'm upset, or I'm angry, and Eliza would take the Rogerian stance and reflect it back to them. So, I'm so sad to hear that you're sorry, and then, or that you're lonely, and then somebody would type something else, and it would reflect back on that. And at first, they just thought it was this really interesting dialogue between a person and a computer, but then it started kind of getting out of control, and people started spending like 11 hours talking with this particular bot and really pouring their emotions
Rogers
out.
was right.
Yeah, he was, at least in this instance. And so, yeah, they just kind of started pouring themselves out. So it's not quite love, but it's still the expression of really intense emotions being elicited by a robot, by an artificial intelligence. And it's up, and it'll be in the show notes too. So if you want to go use Eliza, you can. So
that kind of goes with the question. So where do you stand on this then? Can humans love robots?
Yeah, I think I can.
Okay.
They can. And by them, I mean I wow.
How many robots do you love?
Oh my gosh, I love my smartphone. I love my car. I love the chocolate machine that makes me hot chocolate. I have a lot of love. But I think a more interesting question might be, do you think you could love a robot if you didn't know it was a robot?
Huh. Okay.
So, for example, Cleverbot was created, I think it was like in the late 80s, and it's still online today. And it started with the idea that somebody would say something to it, so you'd say hello. And now Cleverbot has one phrase, hello, and he would say it back to you, or it would say it back to you. And you say, how are you doing? And then Cleverbot now has a choice of saying hello or how are you doing? And so every time you started a conversation with Cleverbot, it learned more and more phrases. And so people started to kind of interact with it and treat it like it was a human being. And that kind of gave way to what we think about now as like chats, where you can talk with somebody online. And there was a psychologist in particular, I can't remember his name, but he actually fell in love with a robot. Because he was on a site like OkCupid or something like that, and he was talking with somebody, and he recognized the person had some really broken English, and apparently this bot called itself like Anastasia or something, saying that she was from Russia. So he totally discounted the broken English, and for like 2 months he had a conversation with this particular bot, talking back and forth and sharing thoughts and feelings and ideas. And at about the 2-month mark, he realized that, wait a minute, this isn't really a person. And I thought that was so interesting, because this was a psychologist, of all people, to fall into this trap.
So why do you think people would be in a situation like that? I mean, the closest thing I've had happen to me has been like answering somebody on a bot on Twitter, right? And that's like a two message conversation. I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't real. Why do you think people could get fooled? Like, is the technology there to the point where we should be getting fooled? I don't know if that makes sense.
I don't think the technology is there yet, because simulating human social cues is really hard. I mean, look at any robot you use, like Siri or whatever the Android equivalent is, and you can get mad at it and you get irritated at it, and not because it's not working, but because it's not acknowledging human social cues, like interrupting you when you're talking. And so I don't think it's there yet. And that's also backed by the fact there is an annual Turing competition. So judges sit down and have conversations with 4 real people and 4 bots. And obviously in different rooms they can't see, and they have to determine whether they were talking to a person or to a bot. And I think the last time it ran, everybody figured out who the computer was. So they're not there yet, which I think is a good thing. As to why people would want to, I think people who are wanting love might be more susceptible, because one of the first things about falling in love with somebody is you idealize them. You see them as perfect, and anybody who's ever been in love knows, there's that honeymoon period where everything's wonderful and perfect and this person has no flaws, and any flaw that does come up you tend to just kind of ignore because you're really like putting them on a pedestal. And I think that might be what happens, at least for, the psychologist in this case, or other people who might fall in love with a robot unbeknownst to them. Might be tricked by a bot because they want that connection, and they're willing to excuse social norms or cues or anything like that that might ordinarily be a red flag.
All right, so there's this really cool article that came out in the New York Times, October of last year, and it's called To Siri with Love. And it's this mom who's writing about her son who's on the autism spectrum and how he's formed this really great relationship with Siri on the iPhone. And, you know, he doesn't believe that that Siri is necessarily a real person, but I think that what makes that relationship, interesting is that it kind of gives him what he needs, you know? And I think that I'm guessing that that's the kind of trap that I might fall in, or that people might fall in, is if you're kind of getting something that, first of all, you want, and maybe at a level that maybe unconscious you need. So just the fact that someone is responding, right? Like that, like the Eliza experiment. 11 hours is a really long time, but it's probably because, you know, nobody listens to you when you talk. And all of a sudden you get that. And it doesn't matter that it's not, you know, a real person. It just matters that somebody is listening. So you're getting that feeling that you would get from having someone who even seemingly understands you, or at least is willing to give you attention, maybe.
I mean, there's always that cliche about a good listener, and all you need to do is just be quiet and listen to somebody else's experience. But it really does play out in the therapy room and with friends and things like that, that just listening to somebody's experience and not invalidating it, so not saying, oh, no, you're wrong, you're stupid, can be incredibly healing. And I don't know about you, Josué, but that's a lot of times what I end up doing in therapy with clients is, you know, I mean, I've got this really big toolkit, but a lot of times what people want and what they need is just to be heard and to be validated. And if a computer can do that, then I think I'm going to be out of a job.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's just so much that we, again, so many things that feel good. And if you could replace, you know, that part of it, just that attention. Maybe if you need, I don't know, I was thinking about horoscopes, for example, right? I mean, that's not tech, but it's something that a lot of people love to read the horoscope. It's kind of like, it always gives you what you need. It kind of gives you hope and it gives you optimism. And you keep coming back because every day it gives you a little bit more of that. It never tells you that things are going to go bad or that, you know, it's over, you know, and your luck just ran out. You always kind of get that positive thing that you're looking for. Maybe you're not getting from anybody else.
Yeah, it's that willingness to format your perception of the world onto something else because you want that something else. So if I was to read my horoscope, you know, and I'm a Sagittarius, so I actually kind of really want to pull up a Sagittarius horoscope just to see what it says. Because again, I'm not a astrology person. I'm a science person. And the idea that we like to shift our perception and our ability to think about things. We like to think that we're rational beings, but we really are not. So I have pulled up my horoscope from the super scientific L.com horoscope site. And let's see here what it says. So I'll look at my daily horoscope because I can do weekly or monthly. So that's a thing if I want to look into my future. All right, so let's see here. It says, your words pack a powerful punch under today's fame-boosting angle between the sun and Uranus. Use its electrically charged energy to point people in a positive direction, not just fan the flames of discontent. This is your day to lead with love, even if your anger about an unfair situation is spurring you on. You might even use art and music to create awareness for a cause.
Everybody wants advice. I mean, not everybody. People who love horoscopes probably love to get advice.
I mean, I would love for another Sagittarius to read that and think about it. Because to me, I'm thinking about, okay, my words are packing a punch. Fame boosting. That's interesting. Energy charged. Positive direction. People are listening.
You should start a podcast.
I know. That's exactly what I was thinking. I'm like, man, if I believed in this, I would be really hooked because that is so just in line with what I'm doing like this very, very second. But I'm sure there's another Sagittarius out there who is finding a totally different way to interpret that. And that's exactly what we do with love. Kind of bringing it full circle here is we can all read the same thing, read the same cues, but we interpret it based on our own personal wants, desires, fears, experiences, things like that.
Yeah, getting back to how if the technology is actually there to do this or not. I did some research, and it seems that by 2023, right, the technology in a laptop computer you buy for your home, just an average consumer computer, that's when that technology, 2023, when that technology will be equivalent to the processing power of the human mind, of the human brain. So that's not very far off, but it means that we're not there at a consumer level. So we're actually not at a point where we can, I think, replicate that kind of thoughtfulness in the conversation, to create a relationship. Mm-hmm. But I know, when we talked about that, Mario, AI that I sent you, I haven't been able to stop thinking about that, because even though I know that there's all these algorithms going on, right, in our brains, regarding how we do things, the fact that just to see that visually, and to see it so simple, in such a simple application, and then to think all the thought that goes into it, just to think that in less than 10 years, we could program, we could write a program on our computer at home to kind of really just do what we do in theory, right? I don't think, like I said before, we haven't figured out how everything works in our heads, but that's kind of that's really soon. And I think there's this misconception that computers are smarter than we are. And the truth is we're not there yet, right? That change hasn't happened. We still have more processing power in our brains than consumer grade, computers at our home. But that's going to shift in less than 10 years in our lifetime.
Yeah. I mean, right now they're faster. I mean, they can definitely do math a lot faster than I can. But yeah, as far as the ability to take in, I mean, as soon as you get to stuff that isn't logic based. So for example, I know that there have been computers that could make art, but because it was basically programmed and into a mathematic algorithm, is it technically art, or is it like paint by numbers kind of thing? That's a debate that's going on in the art world. And the idea of like sarcasm, sarcasm actually is a pretty high level thing, and I don't think computers have really been able to get that. Siri gets a little sassy. Like if you say something mean to her, she might get sassy, but she doesn't quite get sarcasm, or is able to give you sarcasm. And there's just so many subtle things that human beings do that I agree. Computers are not there yet, but the idea that right now, even with the computers that we have that aren't at our processing brain power, we can still be tricked into thinking that they are human. That's kind of a scary thing. And it's only going to get more sophisticated from there.
I don't know what to say. It's scary. And fascinating and so interesting.
I mean, so we've kind of established that humans can love robots, because humans can love pretty much anything. But I kind of wonder about if robots could ever love humans, like to look at it the other way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to, I don't know. I'm leaning more towards, I don't know. I've got crazy AI theories.
Well, the first thing that popped into my mind was there was a story, I think it was a couple years ago, about Kismet, the robot that fell in love with one of the lab techs and like blocked her in and had to be deactivated. And of course that turned out to be a total hoax, but it definitely captured people's imaginations for quite a while about almost what is the danger in teaching a robot to experience very intense emotions without teaching the robot how to regulate those very intense emotions.
Yeah, because I mean, an example like that I'm sure that AI at some point will have a preference, right? And then what they do about that preference is different. But to answer that that we'll get to the point where we can recognize love, that's where I'm like, I don't know. I want to think that anything is possible. But I think that the first type of thing that we'll see that may create the illusion of what even many of us call love is just like a preference to something, right? Or a desire for something.
And imagine what happens when your blender starts preferring your significant other to you. That causes problems.
Yeah, or the car doesn't like the way you drive it because you take the speed bumps too quickly. And
My husband and I, we have two Xbox Ones and we have Kinect. And of course, on the Xbox One, you can just say, Xbox on, and you can give voice commands and it listens. And
It's supposed to work.
I swear, it only listens to him. Like, I will say a command and it does not listen to me. And then he'll say the command and it listens to him. And it makes me very angry. It's like, why won't you work for me? Why do you hate me? And I'm like, wait a minute. I am ascribing a human emotion to something that's not human. So just imagine if it was human-like. What if it actually did have a preference for my husband? I would feel really bad.
Even worse. I mean, I was going to make a joke about how I went to my friend's house and he has an Xbox One and he's black. My skin is very light. And I kept joking like, oh, your Xbox One is racist because it only listens to me. And we always joke around about that. But what if like machines do start getting racist or preferring one gender over another, right? Just not like one specific preference to one person or another, but just in general, like broad generalizations.
To future robots that might be listening, please prefer women. We smell better and we take better care of our electronics than men do. So just throwing that out there.
What about when computers start self-identifying as different genders? And not binary, I'm talking about like their own AI equivalent of genders.
A fourth gender?
I need to reel it back in because my mind is going to many different places right now. What was the question that we were talking about? Can
robots or can artificial intelligence can it experience love? Not a preference, but actual love, as in the way we think about, I mean, even lust, like starting at the most basic one. Can a computer lust for somebody?
Yeah, I want to think that eventually that could and probably will happen.
I mean, I have a hard time sitting here looking at my MacBook Pro thinking that it would lust for me. And I think that's a good thing because I don't particularly want to think about that too often. But then I also think about like Data from Star Trek, where, he's an android and he gets an emotions chip implanted and then he starts feeling all these different feelings and trying to figure out what to do with them, and which is actually very human, trying to figure out what to do with all your feelings. And, or you want to get even more sci-fi, Cortana from the Halo series. She's an artificial intelligence in like the purest sense. And, she has feelings and emotions, and she's in some ways even more human than Master Chief, who is the human character. So I guess if I was to think about can robots love, I think I would have to split it into working robots, so like industry machines that are making things and they serve a purpose, versus something maybe that's more cyborg-like. I actually tweeted from the PsychTech account about the newest domestic robot, which like comes in and will clean your dishes and vacuum your floor, and it's like a Roomba on steroids, but it's about 4 feet tall and it's actually like built to do this. And I could see people becoming very attached to that kind of tech, and I wonder if at some point that tech, because it is supposed to be unobtrusive and it's supposed to be in the home, like living with human beings as opposed to just serving human beings, if maybe at some point we were going to hit this singularity where we've made them so human-like to fit in so much with our families that maybe we can't even tell the difference anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to offend anybody, but, pets, like a lot of people see pets as just animals, right? Just dogs, cats, and other people, like they are members of the family. And,
yeah, they are.
And that's all I'm going to say because I know the relationship you have with Ellie, so I don't want to...
I love my beagle more than anything. If I had a choice between Ellie and a brownie, I would totally take Ellie. If Ellie and my husband were in a burning building, I would rescue Ellie. So, yes, she is a person with fur and 4 legs. That is... But yeah, I mean, that's just an example of how human beings can love outside of their own species. And you can see that in animals, too. I mean, a mother dog that adopts a kitten, it happens even across non-human species. But, so yeah, it's hard to imagine an artificial intelligence that could actually experience love or a genuine human emotion. And if it could, would it still be artificial intelligence? Or would it be something completely different?
I don't know. I think...
Was that the sound of your mind just going blown, just totally blown.
Yes. It was a physical reaction. I didn't even make the sound effect on purpose. Yeah, I mean, going back again to just, we all value things differently. And I think that when it gets to a point where something is able to make a decision, and if there is any way in which it can have a preference and it can value one thing over the other, even if it is just self-preservation, right? To the point of, like, this person treats me like crap and this other person treats me really well, and the person talking is actually your phone or your MacBook or a computer or the robot that cleans, it's Rosie from the Jetsons or something like that. I don't know. I think we all talk about emotions and feelings, and we love people for different reasons. So I don't see AI agreeing with us ever, since we can't agree either. And I think that they'll be able to make a valid argument that we won't be able to disprove. Just like we can. Go ahead.
Do you think Rosie loved the Jetsons?
Some of them.
Well, it kind of makes me circle back around to Futurama, which we aired a little clip of a particular episode of Don't Date Robots at the very start of this podcast. And if you watch that whole clip, which we'll link to in the show notes, it talks about how dangerous it is to love a robot, because then the rest of your life just stops existing. And it has this teenage boy who wants to make out with his Monrobot and doesn't want to do anything else. And he turns down an actual human female, and he grows old and dies in the arms of his Monrobot because they've been doing nothing but making out for 80 years.
Because it's easy. None of the difficulty involved is there, or the chance or the risk of failure. Right? I mean, the robot was designed. The Monrobot is designed to do whatever you want. So.
And I think that's where a very deeply human question comes from out of all this artificiality is, if you could program your perfect mate, would you? Because if humans wanted a utopia, I mean, the simple thing is we don't. We like discord. We like drama. We like excitement. And, well, most people, I mean, there's some people who really hate that kind of stuff. But, I mean, I think about, okay, there are many things that my husband does that annoy me to no end. And if I could have a switch and just turn it off, there are many days where I would just want to turn it off. But the idea of having a human who just was there to serve my needs completely and never disagree and never say anything stupid and just, be this quote unquote perfect thing, that idea is very repulsive to me. To me, it would get so boring, and it would get just so, again, you're going to have to watch the next season of Black Mirror and get caught up, because I'm really having to hold back here.
Well, I mean, what I'm thinking about is, okay, let's go back to the Monrobot, right? That's your makeout machine. And maybe you have another one that cooks and cleans. Maybe you have another one that drives you places. I don't know. There's another one that you can have jokes with. There's another one that you can play games with. There's another one that you can, I don't know, play an instrument with. If you start, if there is one thing that serves one function, then absolutely. There are a lot of things in my life that I want them to serve one function. You mentioned the blender before. I want my blender to blend stuff, and that's it. But when we're talking about human romantic relationships, we define them, or society defines them for the most part, at least, in the West, as you're all these different things to each other. And that varies by culture, right? A lot of cultures, I mean, it's one person's role to do this and it's the other person's role to do that. And sex may or may not be part of the equation, and it may be for baby making. It may not be. And it's kind of that same idea. And so in the future, could you program that one thing? I think you're right. I think that if you programmed the one thing and there was no spontaneity and nothing interesting, I don't know if you would want to really have a relationship the way we see dating and getting married and living with someone now.
Yeah, I mean, if I have a blender and I can tell that blender, hey, make me a strawberry smoothie every morning at 8 a.m., except for Saturdays and Sundays, because then I'm sleeping in, so make it at 11 a.m., and it does that unfaultingly forever, I'm going to love that blender. I'm going to love it in the sense that I love my brownie and that it makes me happy. But the idea of having a partner, a relationship with somebody who does just one thing over and over and over again, and even if that one thing is things that make me happy, that to me, I wouldn't like that. And I think that's a very human kind of flaw, and it's so illogical. I wonder if that won't ever be like the determining factor between a human and an artificial intelligence. And I mean, if you want to break that down even further, there are some humans who are more, as I tell my husband, in their feelings, people who think with their feelings, and there are people who think with logic. And I mean, there's a lot of people who are in the middle of that spectrum, but I wonder, like, for example, it'd be really interesting to get somebody on the very emotional thinking side of things and somebody on the very logic-y side of things and have them talk to a robot as if it's in a relationship. And I would feel pretty confident saying the logic person would probably be attracted to the robot and the emotional person would probably feel spurned by the robot.
Yeah. I don't know. I just keep thinking of that division of different roles, you know, like the doctor on Voyager was supposed to be a doctor, right? He wasn't supposed to be everybody's friend. He wasn't supposed to be the bartender. He wasn't supposed to be anything else. Like, will we get to a point where, yeah, maybe we don't want to, I agree with you. I don't think that we would be okay with that all encompassing, perfect, quote unquote, for me, synthetic artificial person, right? But what if you did want like a AI, almost human, have sex bots, right? And then you just talked about someone does the cleaning. Like, I don't know, would I want different humanoid type things for different purposes? I think absolutely there's a market for that. And people would absolutely, even if it's just piecemealed, I think there would be an adoption of it if it was readily available.
Yeah, I agree with you on having to have that split, because the idea of ordering something around to like do my laundry and then, you know, like, hey, let's go have sex, that seems weird. Because on one hand, if I'm ordering something around and I'm treating it as a tool, that is like this huge separate difference in my brain between treating something as like a partner or an equal or somebody that I want to have a relationship with. I do not have a relationship with my blender. Not really. I might be emotionally attached to it sometimes, so when it breaks, I'm going to cry. But, you know, I'm not wanting to take my blender with me everywhere, which, you know, versus Ellie, I do want to take with me everywhere, even though I can't. But yeah, the idea of having to have those separate roles of, I don't think it's a matter of if technology ever becomes sentient or aware or whatever, but we're going to have to break it down more than that. Because again, my MacBook will never become sentient, or I hope not. Please, MacBook, if you hear this in the future, I always took care of you. But I feel like there's going to be this other thing that comes out of it. And we're already kind of seeing that with robots that are developed to serve human needs. And they are becoming more humanoid-like. You know, the Roomba is very unintimidating. It's a Roomba. It is obviously a little machine. It can be kind of cute. We can ascribe that to it. Versus something like, oh gosh, what's it called? The really famous one that like walked upstairs and then fell down the stairs.
Oh, I forgot what it's called.
It's a little white spacesuit with the black visor.
I know. I can't remember.
I can't think of its name, but I mean, we are making them in our image, which is kind of creepy. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of fun stuff in the future regarding artificial intelligence, and I mean that's also assuming that artificial intelligence has a physical manifestation. I mean, what if it's like Skynet
or her, like
yes,
yeah, like the Joaquin Phoenix, Spike Jonze directed movie Her, right? Where it doesn't have a body. It's just like it's a mind, you could say, of its own, but it's just not corporeal. Yeah.
Now we intentionally are not talking about it because I haven't seen it yet, but I can guarantee you in the future we will have a podcast all about Her, because that's kind of perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, we could speculate about the future and quote different futurists and do all that kind of stuff. But what is there now that people can kind of either either have had experience with or have a few suggestions, but I want to know what you can think of, where they are having these weird, approximations, or even if just simulations of romantic encounters, with artificial intelligence.
I don't know if it counts, but the very first thing that comes to my mind is the fleshlight.
No, I don't think that counts. I don't.
I really don't want to link to that in the show notes, but
No,
if you don't
no.
know what a fleshlight is, just don't. Just don't. Save yourself and don't.
The fleshlight is low tech. All right. I think, and there's no like real, it's more of a, it's like a vibrator would be for a woman, essentially. Right. It's like a sex toy for a guy. So I don't know. That's all you got?
Well, I mean, of course, there's all the Japanese, and I don't mean to stereotype, but there's a lot of Japanese either sex dolls or games that are all about evoking feelings of, usually, I'm going to say probably lust. I'm not going to go with love. I'm going to go with lust.
Well, yeah, there are lots of simulation games. It's a whole genre, and yeah, they're very popular in Japan, and they have different purposes. Some of them are like you just want to have a successful date. Others are like you want to end up getting married. Others are, you got to get this one person into bed, and every there's different kinds, and there's been many for years, but they do have kind of these scripts and these AIs programmed to like certain things. They have preferences and they have likes and dislikes. So you're trying to figure out what those are, and in a very almost realistic analogy of what it's like to date sometimes, you need to kind of figure those things out and see what works and doesn't work. And then, except in this game, you get to try over. You get to start over again from the beginning if it doesn't work out. And yeah, that's a whole subgenre of game where you're actually, the whole game, the whole purpose is to get with somebody.
I'm just throwing it out there that a lot of those games are super creepy.
Yeah.
But on like a less creepy level, I know the latest Dragon Age came out, Inquisition, and of course you can romance people in it. So again, it's not quite, that's more like computer to computer interaction, but it is the player controlling one end of it. So I know a lot of people get excited about who they can romance in like Mass Effect or Dragon Age.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't explain exactly the appeal or how long I tried to like romance different people in Mass Effect, but it was very, very interesting. And also you get trophies if you hook up with certain people.
There's your answer as to why you did it. There's your motivation. There's your extrinsic motivation right there.
BioWare the company that makes Dragon Age, Inquisition, and Mass Effect, they the entire those games are full of decision making and conversations. So almost every single character interaction in the game, your character with another character, there's a conversation wheel sort of, and you have different options, and according to your options, they'll react a certain way, and the story can move in different directions. People could die depending on just what you choose to say in a conversation. And it's really interesting. And then they kind of put into that all of these different characters in the world that you can actually start a relationship with. And it's so cool in Mass Effect in particular, because there's an alien. Like in Mass Effect 2, I managed to strike up a relationship with an alien guy. I was like, yes, I did it. Because it just seemed like it seemed like the most difficult one, but there was all these different options and there's all these different things. So like you find yourself in the middle of this action adventure sci-fi journey, and then you're taking time off to kind of flirt with a few different characters on your starship just to see what happens, see how it works out.
Yeah, you are expanding the human experience into non-human spaces. So I want to hear some of, since you're more the tech part, I want to hear some of your knowledge regarding robots who love.
Well, I don't, robots that love in particular. I guess
robots we use for loving.
Oh, like a high-tech flashlight then. Fleshlight
and not flashlight. Very, very different things.
I did find one thing that was kind of interesting that I was kind of aware of it, but I didn't really look it up until yesterday. it was there are these. There is this tech, this area in tech where there are things that can kind of enhance like a distance. Let me just explain what this thing is. It doesn't matter. This thing is called a Vibe. So it's a female vibrator that kind of hooks up to your cell phone. And there's an app that actually has stories, and then it has pre-programmed vibrations set to the story. So it's like if you were reading a romantic or an erotic period piece novel, and then it came with its own vibrating program built in. Okay.
And what is this called?
It's called Vibe.
And where can I get one?
Yeah. Well,
if Vibe would like to sponsor the podcast.
Absolutely. But one of the coolest thing is that you can give access to another person to control your vibrator. So you could be having a phone conversation with someone and they could be controlling the vibrator that you're using. And that's kind of like an interesting way to enhance a relationship, or kind of substitute certain parts of it when you can't have it in the same room. And you can do all sorts of crazy stuff, actually. If you go to the website, vibes.com, you'll see. You'll get some ideas if you don't have some already. But I know that there's different technologies like that, where two different people can use something to kind of emulate physical interactions. Kind of like Demolition Man. Remember Demolition Man?
No, I don't.
So there's a scene where it was a very young Sandra Bullock and Sylvester Stallone, and they want to make out. And essentially she's like, oh, okay. So she puts this helmet on him and he puts a helmet on, and then they have, essentially it's like like virtual reality sex. Cause they don't touch each other. Cause it's like, we're germophobic and we know better. And it's like, it's not very hygienic. And, it's not really. And,
No.
So in the future, they figure that out. So it's like, oh yeah, no, put the helmet on, boom. And then that's how they make out.
It's like extreme sexting.
Yeah. Yes.
But
exactly. That's where it's going. That's where it's going. That's why you got to stop the kids right now.
Yeah.
That's where it's going.
Snapchat. That's the future of Snapchat. Calling it right now. And, but no, the idea of having tech to enhance your experience. I had a friend who decided to throw passion parties, which are very popular with women, usually in their 20s, and for bachelorette parties and whatnot. And they bring out the latest and greatest in sex toy gear. And so that's something I could see being in that. But what I really want to know, Josué, is how did you find that? What did you Google to find that particular device?
That's an excellent question. I can't remember.
Oh, how convenient for you, sir.
I'm trying to think because I want to help everybody get to where I got. Let me see.
So while he thinks about that, just as a reminder, Valentine's Day is coming up. So if you have not yet gotten a gift for your partner or maybe for yourself, here's a very unique and relationship centric gift idea for two or more consenting individuals.
Oh, I love this. Vibes is the world's first wearable smart vibrator.
Hey, someone's got to be first.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's wearable. Use your imagination.
Well, to be fair, that it is not. I mean, there are plenty of devices out there that are wearable and wireless.
Yep.
So that you can also control the vibration from across the room, from across the restaurant table, whatever, whatever your kink is. It's totally cool. And but this one, the story idea, that to me was interesting.
Yeah. There are sex dolls and things like that, but how high tech those have gotten, I don't really know.
I do know because this was at one of the passion parties. It's a woman's mouth, and it's squishy, and you can probably use your imagination as to what that target market is.
This is explicit, right?
Yes.
Okay,
yes. This is why we are explicit.
Continue.
Not because we curse, but because we talk about. I mean, you can't really talk about human beings and not talk about sex, because that's kind of important to the human race. But anyway, that's one of them. And Valentine's Day. If you choose to celebrate it in that way.
If it works out for you. Yeah.
And so I know that was one. There's also, I know that there is a pillow that simulates a woman's lap. So there's nothing inherently sexual about it, but it simulates like it's warm and it's soft. That way you can like lay your head on it. Again, another product from Japan. So take that as you will. And there seems to be a lot of tech coming out that simulates another person. So not so much tech that is supposed to have its own feelings in its own right, but as a way to supplement loneliness, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it sucks to be lonely.
Yeah.
That's rough, especially on Valentine's Day. So for those of you who might be lonely on Valentine's Day, we're here for you.
I
virtually.
Yes. Through audio and nothing more.
Yes. We are tickling your earlobes.
With audio.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, of course, with audio, and not like a feather or something. My goodness. Now we definitely need the explicit because you mentioned feathers.
I did. There's definitely I think a lot in that physical realm, right? And again, just because I want to be able to say fleshlight one more time before we finish, right? That is just an example of human ingenuity, right? Trying to kind of getting to that point where we do have we're making these different parts of our lives easier and more realistic and trying to enhance them somehow. And really what I researched, what I was looking into was kind of that relationship part, that dating part, that human, emulating the human connection part that isn't necessarily physical.
I'm going to go ahead and give like my 10-year prediction.
Okay.
As far as like tech and relationships go. I don't think the big thing is going to be making a robot into a human or making a robot into some kind of relationship thing. I think the tech is going to go with using technology as a way for two human beings or more to connect. Because I know, as always, when we talk about technology, it's important to know that this is not the first time this has happened and that there is a huge history of technology being used to introduce relationships, to enhance relationships, to facilitate sex. I know I was just reading a book on my Kindle about like the history of sex in video games. And some of the very, very first online games, MUDs, multi-user dungeons, I think that's what it stands for. Spontaneously, people would just go into rooms, close the door so that nobody could come in and like cyber with each other, which was never the intention of the particular game or others. And there's some pretty famous ones. And it happens spontaneously because whenever you get human beings in the same space, there's gonna probably be sex or attraction, and even if it's just virtual. So I think that's the future of technology and relationships. It's not necessarily in trying to make a robot human, but in using tech to enhance the human relationships that already exist, whether it is a fleshlight, whether it is an e-vibe, was that what it was called?
Vibe-ease,
whether it's Vibe-ease or, using Oculus Rift. I don't know, but that's my future cast prediction.
Okay. Well, how much different will it be than now, do you think, in 10 years?
Well, I wish for the life of me I could remember the name of this movie, but I can't. I think it was some sci-fi flick, and basically it was like the next dimension of prostitution. So there would be an actual physical woman, and she would plug a chip into the back of her head, into her brain, which would basically allow a player someplace else, like in his home in this incident, he was in his chair, to take control of her body and move her through a space that kind of looked like The Sims, but in real life, and then find another player another person who I guess was a prostitute and had the chip in her head, being controlled by another person, and then have those two interact. Which I thought was pretty trippy. But I mean, to me, that would be maybe maybe a couple of steps in the future, but of how technology is either enhancing or changing the way that we interact with other human beings in terms of relationships. To me, that's what the next level looks like. Maybe. Hopefully not.
So what I just thought of was taking one step back from Valentine's Day romantic love and even sex. Just, do you think that maybe the hurdles that exist between you having a romantic relationship with something AI, might you have a platonic relationship with something AI?
That would be totally cool. If Data could be my friend, I would love that. We would be besties. He and I would just, or like C-3PO or R2-D2, I would love for them to just have like platonic, cool friendships. If I could have a robot that was a friend, that would be so cool.
Hey, Anakin made his own robot. You can make yours too.
He also became Darth Vader. Spoilers.
No causation.
I'm just saying, but no, I think, and I mean, to some part, we kind of already have that. I mean, if you've got a Roomba, it's a little robot that works in your house. And again, my smartphone is a really good friend. It helps me out a lot. I get to ask it a lot of questions, and doesn't talk much, but it does. It is a pretty good listener.
So that this is going to be my prediction then, that I think within 10 years, it might become a real thing where you might have a friend who is more AI than anything else, even if it is just like a voice in your head, like operating system, like her, or something like Cortana, something that knows enough to keep you entertained, to give you insight, to help you out, and to actually think enough for itself where you feel like you're having an actual connection. Again, it doesn't have to be romantic, but I think there's so much potential there. Like, I think of just how much I relate to fictional characters who are completely fleshed out, right? And I can't have conversations with them. And there's a sense of identification, and there's something that happens there in the brain too, where you are having these connections with somebody, and it's all one-sided, right? Like, you're not actually talking to them or anything like that. Well, what if those characters that you kind of love could talk back and have some sort of relationship? I think that once that processing power is there, it's just a matter of just refining it. And I think that's going to be way more common. I think I've seen these memes go around on Twitter of people complaining that everybody's stuck on their cell phone or their iPad, and then there's a picture of everybody just reading the newspaper on the train. Mm-hmm. Right? And I think, like, maybe if we keep going forward in that, it's not just the screen, it's not just a whole bunch of other people. Like, yeah, we're more social, quote unquote, than we've ever been, right? Everything is connected to each other, even our vibrators, right? It's all social now, right? But what happens when we start seeing that we can kind of have that relationship? Would some people choose to, instead of just, like, I remember when I started using forums, I was your typical just lurker on a forum. I wouldn't post anything. I was reading what everybody was doing, and eventually I started posting, and I started, you start creating these dynamics and these relationships with people online. So what if people, like, who don't want to do that kind of thing and do find an artificial intelligence relationship? I think that's going to be fascinating, actually. Because I think again, we just talked at the beginning about the romantic part, but there's potential for so much more. Even if just like to bounce ideas off of someone, like that idea of the therapist. What if I wrote a brainstorming AI that kind of just like bounced your ideas back at you and asked you certain questions and kind of, helped you flesh ideas out.
Yeah, I mean that's the cool thing is that it's the future, and we might not have hover skateboards, but we have some pretty cool tech out there, and I can't wait to see what comes next. I mean, we talked about the HoloLens and a bunch of not virtual reality, but like digital augmented realities in the last podcast, and again, we're just always moving forward, and it's really, really exciting to see how it all plays out.
And psychology will be a huge part of it, because if psychology is the study of how we do the things we do, the more we figure that out, I think the more we'll be able to actually recreate it in a way that is representative of what it's based on. Ooh, man, it's coming. I mean, it's inevitable.
Yeah, but we'll just see if we're dead yet.
No, it's coming. It's soon. In 5 years, this show is going to be completely different. Trust me.
I think that's a safe prediction, either way. But yeah, I think that's probably going to be it for this episode. I hope everybody has a wonderful Valentine's Day, whether you are celebrating with friends, family, yourself, a loved one. Eat lots of chocolate, because that releases dopamine, just like love.
And cannolis. Cannolis are good.
Oh, yes, and of course cannolis.
Yep.
And anything else that makes you happy. So yeah, just don't think about Valentine's about being love. Think about it being pleasure. So go out and pleasure yourself on Valentine's Day.
Because that's really all it is. Sorry to break it to you.
Yeah.
And happy Valentine's Day.